I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I just wanna firstly just thank you so much for making the time for us to just have this discussion, so that we can provide, yeah, so we can provide the right insights into the Southern African Producers and Artistic Directors Conference that happened this past week. But before we kick that off, can you just let our listeners know exactly who Mr. Lethlage Mochadibane is and what he's involved in?
Thank you very much for having me. The name is Lethlage Mochadibane. I'm a community development practitioner and consultant at the Alex Theatre Company and Academy. And basically, I was appointed projects manager for the Southern African Producers and Artistic Directors Conference, which took place in the past week, on the 5th to the 7th of September at the Market Theatre, in conjunction with Project R and Market Theatre Foundation and the National Arts Council.
Wonderful stuff. Now, the Southern African Producers and Artistic Directors Conference itself, what are its primary objectives, and what does it look at generally as an association of our creative arts practitioners do?
The critical challenge that the creative industry has is first its definition as to whether it is an arts and culture industry or it is a creative industry. And that on its own is that it defines itself outside the understanding of the mere mortals. Mere mortals meaning that individuals or personally individuals out there. Clear understanding on whether this is it's an economy or is just an entertainment which deserves to be given the kind of parameters that all industries should enjoy. So the conference itself sought to bring the attention not of the people but of the various actors in the stakeholding of companies, in the stakeholding of society, in the stakeholding of practitioners themselves, that this is much more of a creative industry rather than just arts and culture, because one, it provides for a particular area of economic development, insofar as education and development, which is provided for in the various institutions as a qualification for a living. And therefore, what we do on stage is not just to entertain, but it is also to enable that our families can make a living out of it, and ourselves individually can also be looked at as professionals who are deserving of sharing in the economic development of the country, the region, and the continent, as well as globally.
Wonderful, Mr. Mochadibane. It brings me to my next question. Absolutely. Every other area of work or profession in South Africa, whether you are a garden boy, whether you are a chef, whether you are pouring petrol at the petrol station, they all have a guideline, a Labor Relations Act, which has got, which also speaks to their remuneration. They've got an economic framework that is recognized. I'll give you an example. If you ask a domestic worker how much they get paid or what's their rate, they'll give you either an hourly rate or a weekly rate or a monthly rate. But when you speak to the creative practitioners in the creative industry, whether they're in entertainment, whether they're in dance, whether they're in news and whatever may be viewed within it, if you ask them, most people are on freelance basis, what's your rate? Or you ask them, how much do you charge? It becomes a mission. And this I've picked up, whether they're experienced or not. And it speaks to a country that has either ignored or does not have a set economic framework.
We have a department that looks after issues pertinent to creative industry. Therefore, it means There is a regulation, there are laws, there are frameworks that are supposed to look at it. The unfortunate thing has to do with people or individuals, so to speak. For starters, every government, in terms of especially in Africa, when they appoint a ministry, that ministry is basically like a kickback of some sort, or maybe just for a lack of a better term, you could say it is something that needs to be satisfied, but it's not a priority. And on its own, already you have a department where people are earning money for ensuring that they can set up a framework, and that framework needs to be supervised, needs to be given support in all respect that you could see. But the actual people who are responsible to carry out the cultural brand and the cultural limitations of a country are actually subdued. And therefore, it means those regulations that are there are only on paper. And that is why you find actors or practitioners most of the time, they are struggling. It's simply because those who are in there are not themselves practitioners. And if they open to be practitioners for all intents and purposes, they lose their moral high ground and be subdued by political preference and political loyalty to a party line that also subdues the very trait of arts and culture, so to speak.
People go to university to study the arts, and it costs a lot of money. It begs the question, and the policy and lawmakers, why have they neglected, would you say? Because in the last 10 years, it's just deteriorated. From the time SAPC started deteriorating, you could see it all across the new South Africa's creative industry landscape.
The perspective is that, number one, we are generally a country that prides itself on things that are very unique. And uniqueness derives from a brand, and a brand derives from culture. A culture derives from ideas that are different from other people, and the way things are done, in the way we contribute to the general fund of human development in the world. So you have people who are educated, as you have correctly indicated, but you see that it is better to end up being in the tertiary institution rather than being on the stage. And if you are on the stage, is it for vanity or for some sort of just entertainment? And we say from the SAPAC, that is the Southern African Provinces and Artistic Directors Conference, we say no. We have to be very decisive about the industry catering for those who are actually contributing to the identity of a people in the community, in the region, as well as in the continent, as far as possible, alongside other economic products and services. If people can leave this country and visit Europe or visit the West, but the first thing that they do when they are out there is to want to see Hollywood. What is their problem with wanting to see the same facilities in their own country? So it is our duty to study that situation, find resourceful answers and practical responses to make our people to rethink and really imagine what we had that the world did not have. What is it that we also consume from the world that we do not have? And therefore, it becomes an imperative point of departure on our case to build a community that understands, so that we can be able not to see it as a position of novelty, but as a position of earning a living, but also to contribute to the economic malaise that we see in the country as it were right now. Therefore, those of us amongst us who are actually in it for the novelty part of it can only be defeated by an industry that comes together and actually focuses on ensuring that those shortcomings are resolved to the point where ideally we can provide practical solutions.
Wonderful. Now, from the key speakers in the conference and to the final day of the conference, how does the conference look to solve or facilitate finding solutions to these challenges?
Oh, certainly. We obviously looked at the problems as it would be a situation. What are the problems? Are we the problem, or are the products that we are providing the problem? Are facilities a problem? Are the laws and the frameworks within which we operate a problem? Is the system generally a problem? And therefore, how do we deal with that? So what we did as a conference was to resume a responsibility that we know that we cannot solve the problem by ourselves for ourselves. They are for posterity. Some people have set out this process before for us, and we have actually benefited from those. We are not looking only at the problems, but we're also looking at the opportunities. What opportunities do exist? Do these problems actually provide us with opportunities? To what extent can we be able to engage these opportunities? Do we have the skills? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the knowledge and basically the vision to circumvent these kind of opportunities and optimize them? At the same time, we also looked at the threats. What kind of threats are existing? Why are they there? Who and how were they created? And all the speakers at the conference, in essence, provided a paragon of wisdom, but also presented a paragon of problems, which we needed to solve. Because we are not going to be seen by those who come after us as a problem that created a problem, but we're going to be seen as those who tried and fought to change the system to benefit them. There is a large pool of emerging practitioners in the industry, and they certainly are looking at those who have been in the industry, not as celebrities, but as people who have a desire to make the industry work positively for everyone. But also, as you indicate positively, institutions like the SABC are dying, which are supposed to be projecting the kind of work that we are giving. But there are professionals who are giving that duty. And those professionals can only be dependent on what artistic directors and producers on the ground can do. Therefore, it means there is a kind of a relay, and that relay takes place in the form where if the professionals at the level of corporations are failing, they can only be lifted by those who are practicing, who have already felt the smell of dust and actually tasted how dust feels like on the tongue.
The market theatre's history, it's very significant, and how they contribute to the conference goals and atmosphere, as much as they are not under City of Joburg theaters. What's your general sentiment about theaters or institutions like the market theater, who have been able to keep striving and working with local practitioners as much as they're independent.
One of the things that emerged from the conference was the realities of social polarization. For starters, we have Joburg Theatre, which has a market for what you would call white racial groupings in the country, in the city. In the same way as we have stories that resonate with other kinds of people within our country. So we are basically a microcosm of what is happening in our country. What happens at the market theatre, which is generally seen as providing a platform for black theatre, which Joburg Theatre does provide at a minimal level. The distribution of funds is a systemic matter. It's the systemic matter in the same way that you find that in the township they can easily cut electricity or water, and in the suburbs it does not go the same way. So it's a systemic thing, and all we have to do is to soldier on and just keep coming with the productions and services that provide for an attraction of audiences, which have dwindled over the past 20 years, so to speak, because there is TV, there is Netflix, there is Somax, and all other things. And we do not have to complain, but to find ways in which we can also challenge the prevailing threats to the industry or to the stage, as it were. So, yes, the learning institutions are providing some of the insights on how we can deal with those things. But also, there is a paradigm that also sits with us as to whether our country is ready to be receptive to these kinds of developments. They loved Sarafina, most of the people. They love music, but there are intensive stories that people would love to hear about, as long as they are written by people that they know. So we need to be able to find best ways, which is what the conference came up with, of improving that even emerging talent gets to be known out there. Not only those who are having their names indelibly marked on the ground as the only people who could come up with something of substance. As they go, Boningham has left us, may peace be upon his soul, and people are already watching as to who is coming to replace him, rather than as to who is there in the pool. So it is the job of the conference to actually come up and say, we are not going to be lumbering and living in the situation where people are dependent on, satirically speaking, individuals rather than a group within an industry. That is why it comes to be called a creative economy, because it strives on the collectivity of everybody.
Based on the outcomes of the conference, what are some of the good fruits or possible solutions that you see it being able to come up with?
We are going to have a committee that is going to be set up to explore the best scripts and productions that can actually be taken from a community level and be placed on a touring circuit throughout the region. By the region, we're speaking Southern Africa. We're not speaking only of South Africa. So in other words, we're not going to have a production that is going to be staged in one theater, and at the end of that, it is done. We're creating a touring circuit. 9 provinces must actually have the better possibility of seeing it. That includes, by 9 provinces, we are not only talking 9 stations of productions, because in Gauteng only, you've got at least like 4 other theaters that you can actually have a tour on. That also includes the Western Cape, KZN, as well as places like the Northern Cape, which has got 2 stations in particular. So we are looking at about 21 stations in the province, in the nation, and then we stretch out of the nation to the region: Botswana, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Kenya, Madagascar, and Comoros, in order that we actually leverage a common legacy that no other nation can have. A common legacy in language, a common legacy in culture, a common legacy in brands that we have from the interspacing as Basotho, who are in South Africa, and Lesotho, Botswana in the northwest, and Botswana, and Zimbabwe, where you have the common kinds of culture between those in the northern provinces and Zimbabwe. That also stretches it beyond those borders of Zambia and Zimbabwe, Angola, and so on. So that is one positive thing that is coming out. The committee will arise from the first webinar that will be held under the auspices of a touring circuit in Southern Africa. That we hopefully will be chaired by the Alex Theatre Company and Academy. And the second one will be also looking at directly issues that are affecting the region, which are common in the region, not only those that resonate in South Africa only, but resonate with the region at all, so that those scripts are the ones that can be taken across the touring circuits. Those are two things that I can share with you right now. But one of the most important ones is to ensure that they also begin to practicalize what is happening at SADC. SADC has got protocols that govern the creative industries, but actually, because of the political impact or political representation therein, we need to have a seat as practitioners so that we can enable those protocols to be practical for a touring circuit to be alive. That is important to us as it creates a common economic, creative economy and strengthens relations between the countries, as well as developing a common identity that will have an effect also on the polarized society that South Africa is experiencing. I hope I feel you enough.
You absolutely do say and make a lot of great sense. Regional mobilization of the sector. It reminds me almost of what the ANC did back in the days when they realized that we cannot fight apartheid from within South Africa. So we cannot fight the creative industry's current apartheidic position within the country. So let's mobilize regionally, share the cause, and come back and reconquer. Do you find a similar nature of challenges within the creative arts in the SADC region in those other countries? Because I remember last year, the Kazamba Festival, the leaders of the creative arts industries from other countries had so much insight to share, which maybe it was my first time exposed to the regionals creative industries, and I've had so much questions after that. How do you find the climate to be around the SADC region's creative industries?
That's a good question, actually, that you've asked. We had a representative from the city of Johannesburg, and who actually gave us some little bit of insights on what is called cultural diplomacy. But we also had a former member of Cultural Industries Chamber in African Union, who was who is a veteran of the theater industry, who spoke on a subject that we referred to as overview of creative industry in Africa. Now, what I can tell you right now is that what we are doing as countries in the region and in Africa, we have been working as silos. We admitted as much. And the silo mentality has not only contributed to some of the problems or challenges we are in. It is to this effect that we had admitted that we cannot blame those who came before us for that situation. But we know that they have before tried to set up structures. The Southern African Theatre Initiative, SATI, that was first also set up to look into that. But because of funding, it fizzled out. We also then have the African Union, the Arts Chamber, which also now all of a sudden gone quiet. The SADC protocols, which had a festival that used to be run across the region. But once it has had its share in Johannesburg, it fizzled out. There are no reasons that have been given as to why these things have happened. But we can only guess and say we get our act together. We form ourselves into a formidable structure, which would then be given a name at a later stage, but at the moment it is still known as the Southern African Producers and Artistic Directors Conference. And it will from there evolve into an organization that will seek its place within the sets of the various structures of political influence, for ensuring to ensure that the voice of the practitioners is not only heard, but they are also used properly at the events that those structures are hosting. We know for a fact that if the G20 as is coming now in Johannesburg, we are not aware as to who will be providing the part of the branding that resonates with the country or with the region. But obviously, those who are in the organizing chambers would actually eventually set out money that would actually pay for those. So we are not hung up by those things. Only thing that is we are hung up with is when Africa or when the region facilitates activities of a credible nature and of a magnitude, they always sometimes have got to have that form of cultural development and activities. Kazakamba, as you respond, as you say about it, we had Bobby Rodwell, who is the head of Kazakamba, speaking there, the experiences of the Pan-African productions. It also seizes an opportunity from the Southern African Artistic Directors and Producers Conference to ensure that it consolidates the kind of experiences it had over time. So we are not actually going to be fighting or to be going out with begging bowls for funding. We have to find best ways to ensure that we create our own fund, in which case it forces the political setup, the economic setup, the industry setup, and the commercial setup to respond to us as part of a whole body of economics. That is the basis in which we actually are looking at life at this point in time.
This is it is a common thread that will, as an organization, it is the common thread that will lead us to a collective solution around the challenges within the creative industries of South Africa. For the rest of this year, I really want to wish you all the best. And tell me, is there a festival, what do you call it? Is there a theater festival happening this year?
We will be issuing out the role of festivals that are going to take place. And then out of those, that role, we're going to create one regional arts festival.
Oh, wonderful.
That would actually project the whole region to draw people to one of the countries that will host.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to make sure that as a media outlet, I'm an advocate to finding out, attending, coverage, but most importantly, become part of the solution with the whole organization. And thank you so much for this time, but the conversation it's just real quality, and it's I think our nation is going to be listening, or those that are going to be reading or listening, are going to want to start to develop a culture of participation when it comes to problem solving.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.